Hello, this is Ben Television News Roundup, a compilation of major stories in the week ending. Thank you for being part of the program. Today I'm Tunde Alabi. The British Prime Minister Theresa May and Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn have clashed over the Prime Minister's Conservative conference speech that promised to end austerity, citing instances of the effect of government austerity on mental health, policing and local council at the Prime Minister's question time. Jeremy Corbyn challenged the Prime Minister to make due a promise of ending austerity.
The Prime Minister said last week that austerity is over. When will austerity be over for the mental health services?
First of all, can I join the Right Honourable Gentleman in expressing our condolences to those who were affected and our thoughts with all those who were affected by what happened in Indonesia. I'm pleased to say that obviously the Department for International Development was able to respond to that. I understand that the DEC appeal is now up to £10 million as well. And as the Right Honourable Gentleman said, obviously we were able to put support in kind in through the support that was available from our armed forces and indeed from others. And I commend all those who have been working so hard in that area. Now, he raises the issue of mental health, and I'm pleased he's raised the issue of mental health, because this is a government that is actually ensuring that mental health is given the attention that it needs. It is this government that has ensured that there will be parity of esteem for mental health and physical health in the National Health Service, and it is this government that is putting record levels of funding into mental health. But I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, if he's saying to me, do we still need to do more on mental health? And I say, yes, we do. That is exactly why we are setting out further steps today, particularly to improve the mental health of children and young people. But also I'm very pleased that my honourable friend, the member for Thurrock, is taking on the responsibility as the Minister for Suicide Prevention, the first time a government has had a minister appointed to such a post. This government takes mental health seriously. That's why we're putting record levels of funding into mental health.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, it was a Labour amendment to the Health and Social Care Act that put parity of esteem on the face of the legislation. It was opposed by her government. Yeah. And if she thinks that mental health spending is going well, then maybe she should have told the Health Secretary this, because this morning he said it's still way off where we need to be. The Royal College of Psychiatrists has found that income of mental health trusts in England was lower than it was 6 years ago, and children are being sent as much as 300 miles away for urgent treatment. It needs urgent action now. Mr. Speaker, people in every village, town and city know that violent crime is rising. 21,000 police officers have been cut. 7,000 police and community support officers have gone. When will austerity be over for the police?
First of all, in relation to the mental health issue, I've just said that I think there is more for us to do on mental health. And as part of our long-term plan for the National Health Service, we will be doing more for mental health. And I might remind the Right Honourable Gentleman that our plans for the National Health Service will see £394 million more a week going into our National Health Service. He asked me about the issue of policing. And of course, what we have seen is this government has made, including the precept on council tax, has made £460 million more available for policing in this current year. And if he's so concerned about funding for policing, why did the Labour Party oppose that extra money?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, if austerity is over for the police, then it doesn't seem that she's told the Police Federation about this, because they are currently taking the government to court for failing to implement the decision of the independent pay review body. Our dedicated police officers and PCSOs deserve better than they get from this government. In the last year, Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last year, the Education Secretary has been rebuked 4 times by the Statistics Watchdog for making false claims about education funding. I know the Prime Minister is a stickler for accuracy, so given her commitment to ending austerity, can she confirm that austerity is now over for all teachers who will receive the independently recommended 3.5% pay rise?
I say to the right honourable gentleman that as regards the issue of policing, and he talked about the police pay award, in fact this award does represent the highest consolidated pay award since 2010. Now he then goes on to talk about about funding for schools and what is happening in relation to schools. He knows the announcement that has been made in relation to the Teachers' Pay Award, but I might just remind him that school funding this year is at a record high, with the extra 1.3 billion. With the extra 1.3 billion we've put in this year and next, per pupil funding is being protected in real terms. I recognise the pressures that schools are under, but I also recognise that we now see 1.9 million more children in good and outstanding schools compared to 2010. And part of that is because of the reforms we've put forward into education, including the free schools and academies, which the Labour Party would abolish.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Speaker, the reality is that over half of teachers are getting another real terms pay cut next year. They've been subject to 8 years of pay freezes and pay rises capped below inflation. It's no wonder there's a chronic shortage of teachers, and the government has again failed to hit its recruitment target for new teachers.
The Russian suspects in the Salisbury Novichok poison attack have been identified as recipients of Russia's most important military award for their actions in Ukraine. This revelation has cast doubt on President Putin's earlier assertion that he had never met the suspects.
British investigators and their Russian partners identified the second of 2 suspects caught on camera in Britain as Alexander Mishkin, a doctor working for Russian military intelligence.
The most interesting fact is that he was personally gifted by this Star of Hero of Russia, which is the most important award you can have being a military guy in Russia. So there is a picture of Vladimir Putin handling this star to him, which is standing on a shelf in his grandmother's home.
Investigators say Putin awarded both Mishkin and fellow alleged suspect Anatoly Chepiga for their actions in Ukraine. President Putin had previously denied knowing either of the suspects, and the Kremlin on Tuesday refused to comment on the new findings.
The fact Putin denied that he knew anything about it is a clear lie, so we've managed to actually catch him in a lie twice now, because the other suspect who identified was also a hero of Russia and would have received it from Vladimir Putin himself.
A Russian military analyst says being caught in a lie does not matter to Russian politicians.
Everyone in Russia believes that the Nachalniki, the ruling elite, always lie. So that's what's expected from them, to tell lies. So that will not distract for anything. It's not the West.
Analysts say Russian media are more likely to question the competence of the Secret Service after the botched operation, but a British lawmaker warned against underestimating it.
I think the important thing for us is that we realise the threat, that authoritarian states using cyber, using traditional espionage, using assassination, pose, and make sure that we defend ourselves. So Britain and France and other European states, America. Skripal and his daughter Julia were sickened from Novichok, the 2 suspected Russian operatives allegedly left at the entrance to their home. Both Skripals have survived, but a British woman unrelated to the case died from an accidental contact with the military-grade nerve agent.
China's massive investment in Africa and loan packages have been criticized as a dangerous trend that will entrap the continent into servitude with China as a dictator. China has poured billions of dollars in loans, infrastructure, and foreign aid into Africa in an attempt to hold the continent's growing economies.
Africa, home to some of the world's fastest growing economies, has caught the eye of investors around the globe, particularly Beijing, which has showered the continent with billions of dollars in loans and new infrastructure projects, including Kenya's railway, the Madaraka Express.
China is trying to position itself to take advantage of economic growth opportunities in Africa.
China pledging to do even more through its Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion plan to finance and build railroads, ports, roads, and other huge projects in nearly 70 countries. Critics, however, warn that China is luring African countries into a debt trap, lending them money that may be too difficult to repay.
They build dependency. So the choice is self-reliance versus almost servitude. What they do are loans, and as we're learning more and more, often unsustainable financing that mortgages a country's future.
USAID Administrator Mark Green tells VOA contributor Greta Van Susteren the U.S. approach is different.
We ask for reforms. We ask them to respect certain rights and values. What we want for them is to become eventually trading partners, but equal partners.
China has pushed back on the criticism, saying it's about development.
They do, make the argument that there's no political strings attached, that we're not going to ask you to change your political system or to adopt our values. But as we've seen in instances already with the way that China has handled its relationships with other countries, that it's going to be asking at some point down the line, that's going to become an issue, and it will ask other countries to toe the line.
Some worry the effects of China's methods go even beyond the heavy debt burdens.
What China's doing is also enabling corruption in these countries, where the African elite or governments are really making backdoor kickbacks, backdoor agreements, and opaque agreements that are not really privy to transparent interactions.
U.S. lawmakers, in part responding to China's growing influence in Africa, have passed legislation known as the BUILD Act, which would set up an agency to help the U.S. invest more in the continent. Experts say it could give the U.S. a boost in the tug-of-war with Beijing over Africa.
New reports have stated that urbanization is fueling housing crisis around the world. The United Nations figures reveal that more than half of the world's population lives in cities. Experts say that by the end of the middle of this century, 68% of the world will be urbanized, adding 2.5 billion people to global cities.
From Los Angeles, where the very poor have been forced out of the housing market, to Mumbai, packed with nearly 20 million people, cities are struggling with housing. People are flocking to cities, whether smaller urban centers or sprawling megacities like Lagos, Nigeria, bustling with more than 20 million people.
Not just because those are where the high-paying jobs are, but ultimately for the interaction, opportunities for advancement, opportunities for access to resources.
Some countries have gone to such lengths as building new capitals to relieve congestion. Egypt is building one outside of Cairo.
They have tried moving their capitals. They've tried developing new artificial cities when they've had the money for investment. But it only works so far.
Because people want to be where the action is, in cities like Tokyo. At 37 million people, it's the world's biggest megacity. Cities everywhere are facing a changing environment and challenges that brings, like rising sea levels and lack of drinking water.
It's often the case that the growth precedes plans to accommodate the growth. And sometimes land use regulations reflect an earlier era.
People in the developing world face other major challenges. They may be displaced by conflict, have no title to their land, or find no lenders willing to help finance a home.
So things that we take for granted in the U.S., like I own my home, I have title to that, that is often a barrier for people, especially women and marginalized populations in countries. So public policy really matters.
Private initiatives are helping. The charity Habitat for Humanity recruits volunteers to build houses.
But we also, outside of the U.S., we have the leading housing microfinance product. So we're allowing families to make their homes livable. With those, people are installing toilets or cook stoves or other things.
In tackling urban problems, every city is different.
It's at its own stage of development. It has its own configuration, geographic configuration. It has its own economic forces at work. It has its own institutions in play. It has its own history.
And solutions must be crafted city by city.
A 14-year-old Nigerian girl, Tomise Ogunubi, has developed an application that can help a lost child call for help. The application, which uses Google Maps, can save key locations such as home and school, and can make a panic call and send a message when in distress.
I'm very terrible with directions, honestly, because if I go somewhere and then someone asks me to take them where I went to before, I honestly can't do that. You can see that it rings when I click on the button. In no time, this should receive a call.
Bring back to your subscription. It's free.
As you can see, then any moment from now we should get a message. And it shows, please help, I have an emergency and I need urgent help. I am currently at the address. It helps you locate the person when the person needs urgent help.
So when people come to me and say I have an idea, I usually am not very excited. But when people come to me and say I have a product, I get excited because that means you had an idea and you worked on it, and then you have delivered something. It may not be a complete product, and no product is ever complete. I'm sure you still get updates to the best of your apps and even to your phone's operating system.
Being able to know technology is being able to solve problems, being able to use the knowledge and apply it to everyday lives to make lives easier for other people. Being able to make a difference is a key point for me. It's something that I really want to do and I really like to do.
Nigeria's future depends on technology. I mean, I can go out on one limb and just say that. I think it's very important that Nigeria as a country consciously and deliberately makes moves to help get all kids starting to code. Let's put it this way, what do you think Tomise will be building 15 years from now?
My advice for other kids is that they shouldn't think that anything is too difficult for them to do. Because as long as they have the motive and the drive and the zeal, I believe that they can do anything they actually set their minds to do. My heroes are Black women that have been able to make their mark in the world. For example, Michelle Obama and Oprah Winfrey. These sorts of women have been able to be successful amidst the racial and gender bias. And then seeing them doing what they do, it makes me believe that no matter what the world, some people may make me feel like, or no matter how people may treat me, I can do what I set my mind to do, or what I believe I can do.
With our report, we conclude the news roundup for this week. Thank you for being part of the program. I am Tunde Alabi. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.
Regardless, residents settled abroad, living outside the shores of one's homeland can really be challenging and sometimes very difficult. Let's be sincere. to keep pace with updates from the host country abroad can really be difficult. Here on Dialogue in Diaspora, we give you every information, every news, every current issue you need to know on happenings outside the UK. Dialogue in Diaspora is your link between the world and the United Kingdom. It's your window to African development. Here, live on Ben Television.